Hello, everyone. Welcome into another edition of Ville on the Ville. As always, plenty to talk about today. I'm going to get through as much as I can. And we're going to start off with, I guess, the biggest news of the week. And I touched on this in a quick take on Twitter yesterday. And, of course, that was the news of the NCAA appeal that came down on Tuesday. And we know, of course, that appeal was denied. And Louisville has now been asked and forced to vacate their 2013 national championship to go along with the 2012 Final Four and well over 100 victories, several conference championships in there as well that I think a lot of people kind of forgot about those, but a lot on the line in this case, and it's really the polarizing nature of the verdict in this case is a very interesting thing when you start to look at it. And of course, most Louisville fans are going to be biased when they try to look at this because it's hard to see your team that you cheer for have victories and championships removed, especially for those fans out there who watched their first championship. I was fortunate enough to experience a lot of the 80s success, so this wasn't the first championship I had seen Louisville win. But there are a lot of people out there under the age of 40, under the age of 30, or even younger. This was a special moment for them. So to see that removed, to see that taken away. Now, again, you can say I still have the memories that happened. I have the memorabilia. You can see the piece of the court I've got back there. And yes, that is true. However, I think anybody who says, I don't care that they vacated it and they try to say that it doesn't affect you, deep down I think we all can say that it does have an effect. And I certainly am not going to shy away from that because it certainly does on me. And again, I'm somebody who this wasn't the first time I had seen Louisville win a championship. Now, granted, it had been a long time, and you start to wonder, are they ever going to do it again? So when it happens, it is still very special. But, of course, the Louisville fans are going to look at it from that perspective. And then you have a lot of national media who look at this, and to them it's so cut and dry that, of course, they vacated it, and they should have vacated it because the things that went on there were so disgusting and so vile. You had prostitutes in dorm rooms, and you had awful things going on. And again, I understand that, but the problem I have is that from the very beginning, within a week of this news breaking, ESPN was on campus doing interviews and publishing information and getting an image out there for everybody to see, and that image was everybody was playing with hookers and prostitutes on Louisville's campus at parties that were just nonstop, just orgies, just all this stuff going on, a terrible image. And again, the stuff that happened was bad, but I think when you continually have these stories being published, and a lot of it is repetitive, the same thing over and over, giving Katina Powell this platform, letting her tell her story, much of which was embellished. I'm not going to say that there was nothing true because obviously there was truth to it. But again, when you go back and you look at the numbers she had, the stories she told, those were easily determined to not all have been factual. However, that initial surge of information, that became the norm. That became the perception that painted the national image for this whole story. And I think once people saw that, and Greg Postal alluded to it in the press conference, once you see that, you can't get beyond it, and you're gonna have an opinion that you can't change. And then when the national perception also has that opinion, then you feel forced to rule a certain way. Now, I'm not saying it's ESPN's fault that the title was vacated, but I do think that the coverage that was given to this story was always in such a fashion that it made it very difficult for the NCAA to do anything else because the specifics weren't really broken down, I think, in a thorough fashion because the people who went through and read the details and read the specifics, especially it pertains to the appeal that Louisville made, which was a very strong one. Excuse me. You start to see where it makes sense for Louisville to argue that it is excessive, that they vacate a title, that they vacate 123 wins, Final Fours, conference championships, because the players they deemed ineligible did not receive the same benefits, the sultry, seedy stuff that went on the recruiting side of things. And I've talked about this before. I hit on it on my quick take, that this had two separate things going on. Now, again, the parties were the same, but Louisville argued in their appeal that the athletes that were deemed ineligible did not receive the sex benefit, if you will. So what it came down to was You vacated championships on the fact that you felt the prostitution side of things for the recruits was so vile and bad, and it was, don't get me wrong, but you felt that was so bad that you're going to apply that basically to everything that happened in this case, when I simply don't think that is fair. Now, I'm sure, I'm no saint. A lot of college students are no saints either, and I'm sure many people, there's people that sit on these NCAA appeals committees aren't saints as well. Have any of them ever been to a strip show? Okay, because if they had been, then there's a basis for hypocrisy right there. Okay, if they feel that that is such a vile act and vile thing that goes on. Now, again, there were funds that were used. And again, the money really isn't even the factor here, because they painted the morality issue. That was the reason they vacated the wins, was because they were so disgusted. So again, my point has always gone back to, when you deem players ineligible for a reason, that reason has to make sense. And I just don't think that vacating over a player receiving a strip show benefit makes a whole lot of sense, especially when that benefit was not deemed to have been of value. Now, again, this disgusts a lot of people too. They say, oh, well, you can't put a value, a dollar figure on this benefit. But again, we're not talking about sex. We're talking about a strip show. And beyond applying a benefit value to it, what are you supposed to do? I think that was the right approach for Louisville to take. And again, some people didn't like that, and I think that may have hurt them as well. But the big thing, and again, I touched on this the other day as well, the NCAA ruled on a morals clause, basically. Now, this wasn't in their bylaws. This fell under that vague any other things clause that they have, where they can elevate violations based on, certain specific things. But then at the very bottom, there's a very vague one that umbrellas any other thing we deem that we think can qualify the violation to be elevated. And in this case, they felt it was so morally reprehensible that they were going to elevate the penalties and make them level 1 status, therefore allowing them to apply a vacation. And I just don't think that's right. If they feel that strip shows allow them to apply a level 1 status and a vacation to those athletes, if they would have gone in and separated it out and said, okay, the recruiting side of things, you were using, again, prostitutes, and all these terms should be used loosely, because if you go back and you look at this entire story, the specifics of it, Katina Powell and her clan were not doing the things they did at the U of L parties before these events began. They haven't done them since. Okay, these were only isolated to that period of time where these parties took place. So again, when you say strip shows and prostitution, pretty much in my eyes, from everything that I've read, these were parties that got out of control, and then Katina Powell and Andre McGee just kind of started doing this thing on a regular basis, thinking that it was something that was helpful to U of L, when obviously it was one of the dumbest things that's ever been done in the history of collegiate athletics. But again, these are very loose terms, but I'm going to use them because that's what in the manner they were used in this case. But if you separate out the recruit side of things and the strip shows, okay, the recruiting, the prostitutes use to try and lure recruits is as disgusting as it gets. It infuriates me. It should be punished to the highest level possible. Now, that doesn't mean vacating wins achieved by athletes who did not receive that benefit. It means punishing the school in such a way that correlates to how the violation occurred. In other words, you penalize them. You make it more difficult for them to recruit. You apply a loss of scholarships. You reduce their visits that they're allowed to bring in recruits, or even disallow them at all. Okay, you hit them there where that violation occurred. But what they did, as I said, they took that and they applied it to everything, and they blanketed the entire case and said, we can really hammer them by vacating games, and that's what we're going to do. And really, again, it goes back to what Postal said. Once that prostitution thing, it basically blinded them from being able to see this case in any other fashion. And it did that, I think, on a national perception case as well. Just this morning on the radio, coming into work, they're talking about NCAA tournament teams. It comes to Duke and how they beat Louisville. And the guy, this national guy, I think his name was Evans. I don't remember his first name, but he was hammering Louisville. They're done. Stick a fork in them. They're finished. They were terrible. They've packed it in. And then, of course, they get into talking about the vacation, and the host asks this guest, do you feel that was appropriate? And he's like, of course it was appropriate. They cheated. Okay, so again, I'm willing to bet that guy who had that opinion, that strong opinion, had done very little research and really read much, if anything, regarding this case. He took his information, he took his opinion and drew it from everything that he had heard. And again, you can't blame him because that's the picture that was painted. And again, terrible things happen. I'm not going to deny that, but I just think the NCAA overstepped themselves when they applied the vacation based on the prostitution side of things, because the athletes deemed ineligible did not receive that benefit. But the decision has been made, and at this point, what options are left? What can Louisville do? I think a lot of people have talked about the correlation to Penn State and how Penn State was hammered by the NCAA when that stuff came out. Obviously, that was on a far different level than even the stuff that happened at Louisville. It was disgusting. And they were hammered hard and quick. And the mistake made by the NCAA there is they completely abandoned the process that they typically use when an investigation is made, and they went straight to the punishment phase and hammered Penn State in a major way. And when they did that, that's what opened the door to allow Penn State to then come, or the governor of Pennsylvania, mind you, he's the one that created that action, that created the appeal, if you will, that allowed Penn State to get those wins back. But the NCAA screwed up in that case because they didn't follow their process. In this case with Louisville, they did, by the guidelines, follow their investigatory process, and they went through those steps. But I do think there are some things that Louisville can look into. Do they want to take that next step? I think a lot of fans with money, from what I've heard, want Louisville to continue to do that. Rick Pitino chimed in his own little press conference, and a lot of people it was very mixed, I think, reaction to that. My initial approach to Rick Pitino talking when I first heard he was going to was, oh gosh, do we really need to hear from Rick? But then the more I thought about it, I said, look, that appeal, the decision came down, and I think, Rick is Rick, and he just wants to talk and hear his voice. He wants to be heard. So I can understand it because, say what you will about Rick Pitino, or the person he is or the things that he has done, but you can never deny that he loved his players and he loved his teams, and I think he just wanted to let it be known what his feelings were on the ruling. And so I give him that. I'm okay with him giving that press conference in hindsight, so that's fine. But he also alluded to the fact that they should fight it, that he just take it to the next level. Now, obviously, his legacy, a big chunk of it falls on that as well when you're talking about losses of wins and championships. So he does have a little skin in the game. But, what can Louisville do in terms of the Penn State approach? They can't really take that because they did follow that technical process. But as I alluded to, I do think there are some little factors that Louisville can perhaps argue that might get them somewhere. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer. I've never tried a case against the NCAA because that's where it gets touchy. They're a member organization of an institution, voluntarily a part of that institution. So they agree that they're going to abide by these rulings, and they have to really have something solid if they're going to take this into the official legal court system. So what can they take? When I looked into the way this investigation played out, Louisville immediately, and it was interesting the other day, Bob Valvano had on Jay Billis, and they were discussing the case, and I honestly can't remember if it was Bob or Jay. I believe it was Jay alluded to Louisville actually having information about the Katina Powell book coming out and the details of it in August of 2015, so a little over a month before the news actually broke on August 2nd of 2015. And as soon as they got that information, they began to communicate with the NCAA, establish the things that they wanted to do to start the investigation. So immediately Louisville began to cooperate, do everything they could to gather information. And in doing so, they began to get told that here's what you want to do. Chuck Smirt was hired. Again, we were told that Chuck Smirt, he has a history. He knows what to do. He knows what to suggest you should do in order that, as the process moves on, the NCAA will look at you more favorably. So Louisville was continually asked to do one thing, then asked to do another. And I think maybe in there you can say, look, because I think one of the things that really hammered Louisville in hindsight was when they agreed that the violations that occurred could be deemed bad enough to be elevated to level 1 status. To me, that was the biggest mistake that Louisville made during the whole investigation. And I think they did that at the request of Chuck Smirt, because he was requesting that they do it because that's what the NCAA would like you to do if you want to be looked at favorably in this process. You say, okay, you bow and you do the things that we think the NCAA wants you to do, and they'll be more lenient on you in the end. Well, obviously we know now that Louisville could have just laid down and said, chop my head off with a guillotine, and the result would not have been any different than it is now looking back. I can't imagine how it could have been any more harsh. I guess perhaps they could have instituted the death penalty, but that's about as much worse as it could have gotten. So when Louisville said, okay, we can agree to the violations being bad enough to be that you could elevate them to level 1 status, when they did that, that then gave the rubber stamp to the NCAA to apply vacation to those things. Now, if Louisville wants to take this to the next level, I would say, look, we did everything according to precedent. We did everything according to things that the NCAA had done in the past, because that's how they operate. They always apply precedent to everything that they do in an investigation. But of course, this was off the reservation in terms of precedent, and the NCAA, in many instances in this case, left precedent. They didn't use it. Now, they argued that they had never seen a case like this before. Now, I think certain aspects of that is true, but I also think there are some cases that have been out there, talking Oklahoma State, Miami, where there has been sex involved in certain instances. So I don't think this entirely is something they had never seen before. But Louisville, I think, should argue and start with, hey, look, we agreed to that, but we agreed to that thinking, well, okay, we're going to agree to that because that's what they want us to do if we want to be seen in a favorable light in this investigation moving forward. And we known that none of this stuff would have helped us, okay, we would not have agreed to that because we don't feel that way, and I truly don't believe they do. I don't think Louisville thought that strip shows for certain athletes could be deemed level 1 status, apply vacation penalties whatsoever. Okay, I don't think they would have agreed to that. I think the only reason they did was because they thought, oh, the NCAA is going to go easy on it. Well, not easy, but less stringent on us when it comes to the penalty phase moving forward. Okay, and from that point forward, Louisville continued to cooperate, continued to do the things they felt they needed to do to make the NCAA feel that they were making corrections, doing things in a way that this would prevent this from happening anymore. Of course, then they applied the postseason ban, disallowing Trey Lewis and Damian Lee the opportunity to play in the 2016 NCAA tournament, which in hindsight was a terrible decision because that gave them very little on the backside in terms of leniency. So I think that's where Louisville should start. Say, look, we never would have agreed to this. Okay, we would have fought that because I truly don't believe that some of the people at U of L think that all those things that happened were violations that could be elevated to level 1 status. Now, again, the prostitution side of things without question, but I think that's where maybe Louisville should have gone in and said, look, the athletes that are being deemed ineligible and that have played that in hindsight are going to say they're not eligible, we're going to vacate games. They didn't take part in that side of things. So is there a way we can separate these things out? And then maybe they should have done that as well. Now, I think the other option is, of course, the NCAA applied this vacation based on morality and disgust, and they were repulsed. It was repugnant. That was the key word, repugnancy. They were disgusted. And that's all fine and good. And to be honest, up until not that long ago, it was, I guess, a sound argument, even though it didn't exist in their bylaws. It just fell under that any other things clause. But as I've alluded to on multiple occasions here recently, the recent events that broke out of East Lansing at Michigan State, and I'm not talking about the Larry Nassar gymnastics side of things, but the things that happened within the sports programs and basketball and football when we learned that Mark Emmert was informed in 2010 that these things could have been happening or were happening at Michigan State that the NCAA should probably look into, if anything else, to make them public and say, hey, we need to look into this. And they did nothing about it. So again, as I've said before, if an organization like the NCAA is going to use moralities to elevate penalties, then you should operate your organization in such a way that when you learn of immoral acts happening, you do what you can to prevent them from continuing to happen. And before this stuff even happened at Louisville, and when I say this stuff, I mean it becoming public and the investigation starting, the NCAA had already failed for many years to do anything at Michigan State and allowed those things to continue for the better part of a decade with nothing happening. So again, I think that weakens the NCAA's case when they want to come in and apply a vacation because they're morally repulsed by things that went on. So I think that's another way that Louisville should go in and argue if they're going to take this to the next level. Now, again, I think most people are going to say, look, you're just screaming into empty air because you're not going to get anywhere. But like I said, I think there are a lot of people who want them to continue to fight this. And I guess if there are people out there who have the money to provide, to fund the fight, then maybe Louisville will do that. But based on what they said at the press conference, do you just keep throwing money at something that you truly don't feel you have a chance? And again, I'm not a lawyer. I haven't argued these cases, but those are just some things that crossed my mind. Would those be sound and valid arguments that Louisville could make? To me, the most sound one being the lack of action by the NCAA at Michigan State. I think that's a very sound argument. Now, it's unfortunate that it happened so late in the game. Louisville's appeal had already been turned in when all this stuff came out. And so, again, I think maybe that would help if Louisville goes back in the court system to fight this. They can say, look, we would have included this in our appeal had this stuff happened sooner, but unfortunately it happened a month after we filed our final appeal and made our final case before the appeals committee. So that's pretty much my thoughts on the appeal. And moving forward, we'll see what happens. I know most Louisville fans, if not all, are going to continue to say we were the 2013 champions. I agree with that. I've already ordered 2 more shirts. And it's funny because right after the championship, I looked for the Rose to the Occasion shirt that I had seen some people with. And I'm like, oh, I want to get that because I had the Rise to the Occasion shirt that all the teams had in that tournament. But I didn't have the Rose one for the champion. And I looked everywhere for one. And the only one I could find was a small white version of it. And I just bought it just to have it. And within 2 weeks, one of my kids knocked a soda over on it. I mean, it's kind of foreshadowing to, I guess, what was going to happen. I don't know if anybody saw Eric Crawford's tweet that he sent out with his little statue that he got that had the 3 championship trophies and the bird, and his cat knocked it over and knocked the 2013 trophy off of it. So I don't know. All these weird things seem to happen around the 2013 championship that were giving us signs that something bad might be happening. But nonetheless, the other day when this happened, I'm like, well, I'm going to see what I can find. And I found the Rose to the Occasion shirt. I tweeted it out. Maybe some of you saw it. And I bought a couple of them, so I've got a couple more of those coming. And who knows? Down the road, what may happen? Things may change. Maybe they'll reinstate it. Will Louisville do something to formally recognize the team without, the NCAA being on it? I know in Kansas, they've got a banner that all of their championship banners just say national champion because their 1988 championship was I don't want to say it was vacated, but they were found to have been under violations. So they don't have NCAA on theirs, and I think that's probably why. So will Louisville hang something up like that? Who knows, but it will be nice if they could, and I think Vince Tyree alluded to them trying to do something to recognize the team and the players that really, when you get down to it and you listen to guys like Luke Hancock discuss what it meant to him and the things that went on. And again, he also said, what happened? You can't take that away. But having it formally removed still has an effect. And you could hear it in his voice, and you can hear it in many of the players' voices and the coaches as well that were involved in that. So we'll see moving forward what happens. But at this point, the chapter is pretty much been closed. And at this point, we'll find out, are they going to take it to the next step? But as of now, it does not appear that is going to be the case. So now on to the things that have happened on the court. Unfortunately, last night, the Cardinals went down to Durham, and they were just soundly beaten, and there's no other way to put it. 82-56 loss to the Blue Devils, in which, it was very discouraging. I tried not to go to negative town. I did go there for quite a while during this game, and as I've tweeted out, the only thing I ever really want to see from a team is effort. And from really the get-go in this game, they just seem to lack some focus. I've beat the drum for the past month or so that if this team is just focused and dialed in, they can compete with anybody. And we just did not see that. We saw, a lack of focus, passes, just really bad passes being thrown out of bounds, just at players' feet. I think they had 7 or 8 turnovers in the first 10 minutes or so of the game, and most of them were really unforced, just guys leaving their feet and then throwing a bad pass, not looking. They were making shots. They were just turning the ball over a lot, and they actually weren't, with about 10 minutes to go in this game, it was 16-15 Duke. But then just like that, Duke got sharp and Louisville continued to play sloppy. And then in a period of the last 10 minutes of the first half, it just got out of control. And unfortunately, I got a very similar vibe right down to the way the first half ended and then the second half played out to what we saw in Rupp Arena back in December. So this, excuse me, it was very discouraging seeing that lack of effort. And David Padgett, the players, many of them said, this appeal is not going to have an effect on us. The results of it, losing the banner, we didn't play on those teams. But I feared, Tuesday afternoon, David Padgett has had his Duke game press conference just about an hour after all this stuff went down. And he started off his press conference by talking about the appeal decision. And, he came right out and said, I really wish they would have waited on this because it's not fair to my team. They've been dealing with this all year and some of these guys for multiple years, and this is going to have an effect on them. So as soon as I heard that immediately gave me concern over, not just this Duke game, but really how's the rest of the season going to play out. If David Padgett is already saying it before this next game has even tipped off. And so that was what I was going to look for. I really, I tweeted out this game to me was going to be a fork in the road. Are they going to come out and give good effort and fight? Or, for lack of a better term, are they just going to fold up the tent and pack it in? And unfortunately, I did not see much fight against Duke. Now, again, very difficult environment. The timing of this could not have been worse. We've been talking about this 5-game stretch for over a month. It was already going to be a brutal uphill battle to begin with. But then you throw this in, and it just compounds things even more. So you do think, if you're one of those players and you're already dealing with so many other things outside of basketball, to have this thrown on top of it right before you go to one of the most difficult environments you're going to be in all year, that's tough. And I get that it can be very difficult, and maybe you just decide that I've had enough. And so we saw an effort last night that kind of gives you that vibe. So, are they going to fight back on Saturday at Virginia Tech? I don't know. We're just going to have to see how it goes. It's a team they've already beaten. I think, as I said, this Duke game is going to give us a really good idea. It's going to be a fork in the road. The Virginia Tech game, to me, without question, is going to be a very good indicator of how these last couple weeks are going to go, both in the regular season and the ACC tournament, because this is the team they've beaten. Now, granted, it was here, and it was a hard-fought game, but they know they can beat Virginia Tech. They've done it once. I would hope that they feel they can do it again, even if it is on the road. So I want to see what kind of effort we get. From start to finish, are they going to come out and lay it on the line and give good effort? Because like I said, that's all I care about. You can lose by 26 if you're playing your butts off and laying it on the line. But if you're seeing guys not even getting across half court before a shot's going up, standing and not playing defense, losing track of their man repeatedly in a half court defense on the strong side. On multiple occasions, you saw instances where the ball was in the post, and a guy just turned around and watched didn't double down to try to pressure, just kind of stood and watched the ball in the post and totally lost track of their man, let him float to the corner for a wide open 3-point shot. You're talking about Duke and Grayson Allen letting him just slide 5 feet over and be wide open because you're just not staying focused. If you're weak side, you can do that with your man because you need to know where the ball is. But when your man that you're responsible for is right there by the ball, you have to know where he is at all times. So you see things like that, just a loss of focus happening, across the board. I'm not going to call a single guy out, because so many of them were doing it. Now, Ray Spalding, I think, deserves credit because I think he's busted his butt now for more than 2 straight months, a guy that got a lot of grief for his first 2 years at Louisville for not giving consistent effort. He's doing that, and I think I've done it. I've heard many other people say that's the guy who has done it game in and game out and has been consistent every night. And if everybody on this team would do that, we wouldn't be sweating out going to the NCAA tournament now. We would be easily in. Losses to Florida State, to Miami, to Syracuse. You probably don't lose 2 of those, maybe even all 3 of those games if all the guys come out and give that consistent 40 minutes of effort from start to finish. But we're just not seeing that. So down the stretch, what are we going to see? All I really want to see is effort. And if I can see that, I'll be fine with it, win or lose. I'm willing to take the results. But again, Saturday we'll see. Are they going to provide that effort? They said they were. They've got to, figure things out quickly. We're not going to let this decision affect us. So let's see what happens. If the game gets tough on Saturday, if they get behind 10-0, if they get behind 20-10, what's going to happen? Are guys going to start taking quick shots and trying to do their own thing? Or are they going to stick with a game plan? Are they going to abandon ship or are they going to fight? That's going to tell us a lot on Saturday from this Louisville team moving forward. So they've got Virginia Tech Saturday, and then they host Virginia. It was interesting looking at the advanced metrics before the game last night against Duke. They were underdogs in every remaining game, which is no surprise. But what surprises me was that the numbers, the metrics really didn't change a whole lot. After the game last night, I thought they might change drastically. Last night, they were only at 10% odds of beating Duke. That should have probably been about 0.5% based on the outcome. They were a 33% chance of beating Virginia Tech, 23% beating Virginia, 45% of winning at NC State. After the game against Duke, the Virginia Tech metrics went from a likelihood of 33% winning down to just 31.6%, so not much of a change. The home game against Virginia really didn't change much. Maybe that's because it's home. It went from 23% to just above 22%. The game at NC State went down from 45% odds to 43%, so that actually surprised me. I thought based on that result and the way Louisville's been trending, losers of 6 of the last 9, that those numbers might shift more dramatically, but I guess over a period of a season, they just aren't going to do that based on one game. So we'll see. Saturday's going to tell us a lot, folks. I think, if they, I'm not going to say they have to win that game, but if they at least show fight, because Virginia Tech, as I tweeted out last night, it seems like all these teams Louisville is playing, all are playing their best basketball of the season. North Carolina, playing great. They haven't lost in February. Duke, playing great, even without Marvin Bagley. Virginia Tech now, they've won 3 or 4 in a row, I think 5 of 6. Beat Virginia on the road, playing fantastic. Just beat Clemson last night in Blacksburg. So you're going into a place where a team that they feel good as they've had in probably the past decade of getting comfortably into the NCAA tournament. So you're going into an environment against a team that is fired up and ready to do something they haven't done in a while. And that's make a strong postseason run. And it's not going to be easy. So they're going to be, they're facing an uphill battle every night from here out. So we're going to see how they do on Saturday against the Hokies. And I think it's going to tell us, like I said, a lot moving forward. Now, a team that's not struggling, the women, 2 games left. They continue to roll along, and not all that great an effort against North Carolina the other day on Sunday. Asia Dore has not practiced all week, but it sounded like Coach Walls was confident that she would be playing in this game, and he said, I leave it up to my players to tell me if they're ready. Now, I would hope that he actually leaves it up to the doctors, but I think I kind of got the vibe of what he meant when he said that. But they host Virginia tonight, a Virginia team that's in a very different position now than they were the last time they played Louisville when Louisville went to Charlottesville and the women just absolutely destroyed Virginia in a dominant second half. Again, it was pretty close at the half. They ran away for a 30-plus point win after the break. But Virginia's a good team. But again, Louisville showed that they're a much better team and on a different level than Virginia the last time they played. So even with Asia Dure out, you would think Louisville should get the job done. Jeff Wall is hoping to get more than 10,000 people out there to this game. This is a team that everybody should be able to get behind, rally behind. They deserve support. You can get tickets dirt cheap. And for everybody that goes, there's going to be also a fundraiser involved of, I think, up to $3 or $4 a ticket that goes to charity. the cancer awareness charities that they've done all month, wearing the pink. And I think each team tries to host something like this where they donate to charity. So Louisville and Jeff Walz want to really try and get as much as they can out there. So I think it's for every fan over 10,000, they're going to make that donation. So hopefully they'll get a good crowd out there tonight against Virginia and get one step closer to that ACC regular season championship, number 1 overall seed. If we take a look at the standings for the women, of course they sit at the top 13-1. Notre Dame just continues to win. They're right there behind them, so there's no margin for error. You lose one game, you're probably not going to be the regular season champion because I don't see Notre Dame losing. Now, after Louisville and Notre Dame, it's done. Okay, one of those two teams is going to win the ACC regular season because Florida State, NC State, and the rest are all more than 2 games below them in the standings. And you see Virginia there. Last time these two teams played, they were tied for first place in the conference, and now you see Virginia has lost 4 games since the last time these two teams met. So they are out of the picture in terms of the regular season ACC championship. So Louisville should get the job done. Now, as far as Notre Dame, looking at them, if you're Louisville, at this point, if Louisville gets the number 1 seed in the tournament, you're avoiding the second best team in the conference and probably 1A in Notre Dame until the championship game. You're also avoiding playing Florida State, a team that beat you and gave you a tough matchup, because they look like they're going to be the 3 seed at this point moving forward. So you would get NC State. Now, a very good team that gave Louisville a tough game. It typically always gives Louisville a tough game. And they beat Louisville and knocked them out of the ACC tournament last year. So that might be a good matchup to get Louisville focused if they get to the semis and play NC State, exact revenge on them and send them home for what they did to Louisville last year. But really, Notre Dame right now is playing insanely good. They're winners of 10 straight. They have not lost since playing Louisville. They have won no game by less than 14 points. Their average margin of victory in this 10-game winning streak is 27.6 points a game, and they have just been routing people night in and night out, including Florida State, where they beat in a game that looked just like the game that they lost to Louisville. They won 169 at Florida State a few weeks ago. So they are playing really well. So Louisville, you just hold serve, get that number 1 seed, and you avoid playing Florida State and Notre Dame. Okay, so if Louisville loses any game from here out, they drop to second, and that means they're going to have to play, most likely, Florida State and Notre Dame. So that's another reason why, not just getting that number 1 overall seed and winning the ACC, but you make that path to winning an ACC tournament that much easier by avoiding the 2 other best teams in the conference in that draw. So the ladies tonight at the Yum Center, get out and support them. See if we can get one step closer to that regular season championship, and also get out there to help get as much money raised to fight cancer in that initiative that they're doing at the Yum Center. I think Jeff Walz really wants to get that average attendance up. It's a little down this year, and this is the best team Louisville's ever had. So 2 more games to go to watch, a championship level team moving forward. We'll see what they can do against Virginia, and then it'll be Pitt on Sunday. The next thing up, the baseball team has continued to play well. They got another win over Eastern Kentucky on Tuesday. Their home opener, they won it 4-2. They got behind again early. They got behind 2-0 in the first inning, but then didn't allow any more runs. Very similar to getting behind early against George Mason on their final game in Charleston. Of course, they got behind big and then came back big. They defeated Eastern 4-2 to move to 4-0. They host Youngstown State this weekend. Now, the weather is very sketchy, so I think they've moved the first pitch up a little bit on Friday to 2 o'clock. So we'll see how that goes. If you want to get out to Jim Patterson Stadium, you're just going to have to keep an eye on social media. Just follow Louisville Baseball. And I usually try to retweet stuff as well to see if they move those pitches around. That was very good to hear. I wasn't able to get out because of my work schedule to the home opener on Tuesday. But they had, I think, several hundred more people there than they did for last year's home opener. And that's great news, because my concern coming in was them charging for tickets this year and the timing of it with all the other stuff going on. Attendance is down. Saw it at football. We're seeing it at basketball. So it really concerned me for baseball now that they're charging for tickets. But, in a way, maybe baseball is like the bastion of positivity here over the past couple years. They've played very well. They've done so many good things in the community, and I think maybe that's just a sense that people, continue to like to support that team. There hasn't been any negativity over them. Now, again, it's not the players' fault for for the basketball things that went on, but again, I think extenuating circumstances, fans just let that affect them, so they haven't been out there. So it was good to hear that they got a good turnout, and hopefully that'll continue. But we're going to have to dodge some weather, it looks like, this weekend, and they're in the midst of a 14-game homestand. But again, talking about this time of year, that's what makes it tough here in Louisville with baseball, is that the weather can just be so difficult. I'm going to wrap things up now. I want to thank anybody who tuned in to take a look at the episode today. Again, this weekend, I think the game against Virginia Tech and the men is really going to be an indicator to what we can expect moving forward. Is this team going to fight for a postseason bid in the NCAA tournament, or have they just, I don't want to say quit, because in a way I understand the difficulties of what they're dealing with, but you would like to see that fight. And in closing, I think a lot of people have talked about, a couple of years ago, the fans all rallied around that team that dealt with the issue when this whole Katina Powell scandal first broke, and you had Damian Lee and Trey Lewis, come here to have the opportunity to play in an NCAA tournament, and they had that removed, which in hindsight now looks even worse. I was on board when Louisville made the decision to put in the postseason ban. I was not a fan of that. I did not like punishing that team at that time and then, trying to get it behind you. To me, I thought that was kind of taking the easier path. I understood why they did it, certainly, because then you can move forward. But at the same time, you're punishing players who did not deserve it, especially Damian Lee and Trey Lewis. But in hindsight, it looks that much worse because the NCAA didn't really change. I don't think that really helped Louisville at all. And then when you think about Damian Lee and Trey Lewis losing that opportunity to play in the postseason, and you think about this year's team, I think some people have been critical and saying, we rallied around that team 2 years ago. We need to rally around this team. And I totally get it. That is true. However, think about Damian Lee and Trey Lewis looking at this team, seeing a team that still has every opportunity to get into the NCAA tournament. Nothing is stopping them other than just not putting forth effort. They've got teams they can beat on this schedule. They can work their way back in. So you would think that Damian Lee and Trey Lewis would want this team to fight and fight as hard as they can and not quit, because they still have that opportunity, the opportunity that those two young men did not have a chance to enjoy. And it had nothing to do with effort that they put forward. It had to do with other people making a decision to take that away from them. So in a way, that kind of aggravates me even more. I try to look at this and be sympathetic, and part of me is, but then part of me also sees this other side that says, look, you've been through some tough stuff, but so were some other guys. Not only did they go through that difficult situation, but they didn't even have the opportunity to play in the postseason. So I want to see that fight, and I want to see that effort. And as long as I see that, as I've said, I am more than happy with the outcome of the game, regardless of the score. This has been a Ville on the Ville episode. I want to thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, as always, go Cards.